Right. How are we going? We're live. Transition. Alrighty then. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another virtual star party. Now, if you're seeing this and you're seeing me and Roger, this is because we're on my office PC, and you know it, it's raining. So we're gonna have, yeah, just my luck, yeah. So I'm pretty sure the curse of Ellie and her. One of our volunteers who got onto a telescope operator status and then got 3 months worth of cloudy nights before getting a clear night again. I'm pretty sure that's now jumped over to me with these virtual star parties. But don't worry, I was up late last night and I took some nice photos for you, and we're going to go talk about that as well. And Roger, who you might have heard as a discombobulated voice a couple of back on the 23rd of May when we did the special Week Belt edition.
And I was just a voice then, wasn't I?
Yes.
It was so dark.
Yes, but you still got the opportunity to give a couple of rigs into me as well. So I'm sure you'll do that tonight as well. So
that's right. And Matt, with the cloud, you may have bad luck with your live streams, but at least we've had good luck with the viewing nights that we've had this weekend. Yes,
so we're back doing them, and Roger's even taken a photo of I think was it Saturday night or that you were on?
Sunday night.
Sunday night, yes. And so we'll show you some really cool couple of photos. Did you take the Galaxy one as well? No.
No, that was actually from the that weekend we were out at my
block, okay. Yeah. So the first, we'll show you some of Roger's cool astrophotography, because he is a fantastic astrophotographer, and he took a really good photo last night. On last weekend, and also on the Yundigan special as well. So what we'll do is we'll start off tonight. Thanks to the guys in the chat here. If you do want to ask any questions while we do these live streams, we've got a Discord channel which you can see in the bottom left of the YouTube video here. And if you're new and you haven't seen this before, welcome. And if you want to join that chat, you can just click on the link in the description area for this video, and you just follow that link and sign up, and you can ask questions of us, and we'll answer them as best we can try. If not, we'll fake it till we make it.
You might have to give me the questions, Matt, because I don't think I see the questions from you.
Oh, that's right. You have to join the Discord channel as well. So, and while you're at it, there's links down there to our social media. So if you do want to keep up to date with what's happening in astronomy and also what's happening here at the Observatory, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram as well. And there's a Patreon account there if you want to help support the Observatory, as we're a volunteer group, and you get some cool stuff with it as well. And thanks very much, and we'll start off. So what we're going to be... Oh, and also, while you're at it, if you can like and subscribe to this channel as well, like the video, and click the notification bell, that helps us out as we get more followers in and help promote astronomy to not only West Australia, but Australia and the world as well, because there's a lot of people in the Northern Hemisphere that don't get to see all the cool stuff that happens in the Southern Hemisphere. And you might have noticed there was actually a really, really cool meteor that flew over the Pilbara of the northwest of West Australia, and that was an absolute humdinger of a meteor. So if you want, we do have on our Instagram page, probably the easiest way to go. There's a link to 7 News, which had some really good footage of it as well. So, other cool stuff that we're going to be seeing in the sky. We're going to start off tonight in the eastern part of the sky. So this is currently what the sky looks like at the moment. So we've got the nice Milky Way band right through there, And we'll just have to go in a little bit, we'll put it in an hour so we can get a little bit higher. But we're going to start off with one of my favourite objects, and unfortunately it's not a great telescope target, but it's a really cool astrophotography target, and that is...
When you say telescope target, Matt, you might be taking your...
just looking through the eyepiece, I should say that. But you do need a telescope and a camera to really get the best out of it. Or if you've got Hubble, then Hubble does a good job of it as well. So,
do you have one in your back pocket?
Unfortunately, I don't have that amount of money. So, if you scroll down in between the constellations of Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer, Scotum, the shield, and also Sagittarius, the centaur with the bow, you'll come across the nebula called the Eagle Nebula. Now, Roger, what's this very famous for?
The Rho-Ophiuchi region of nebulosity.
Yeah, well, there's that one as well, but there's also a very famous image that Hubble took back in the day.
Oh, you're talking specifically about the Eagle Nebula.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look, I always knew it as the Eagle Nebula and M16, and then, of course, Hubble took it, took that fantastic shot in the Hubble palette, and everyone started calling it the Pillars of Creation.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like in the night sky with what I took last night. So you can clearly see the actual pillars right here. So there's one pillar here. There's two pillars here as well. So it's a really nice object in the night sky when you can actually get with the camera on it. So it also has a very young star cluster as well. So it's got this cluster here has got about 460 stars, and they're about 1 to 2 million years old. And they also have, but the nebula itself is about 5.5 million years old as well. So it's still, while we talk this, millions being young, everything's really old compared to human age, isn't it, Roger?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, this object is, in terms of astrophotography, it's interesting that it's in amongst the Milky Way there. So it's got good potential for not just zoom in on that object like you have there, Matt. You've got quite a long focal length there, probably.
Yeah, this was taken with the Meade 14 last night.
Yeah, so probably about 4 meter focal length there,
yep.
4,000 millimeters. But people with smaller telescopes or camera lenses of the 400 millimeter kind of to 600 millimeter, you get the Eagle Nebula in amongst the whole sort of star field of the Milky Way around it. So it's a very versatile one.
Yeah. Now this is located about 7,000 light years away from us. So as with telescopes and even with cameras, we're seeing this as it was 7,000 light years, 7,000 years ago, and it's a decent sized nebula as well. It's all in all, it's about 70 light years across by 55 light years across, with the actual cluster itself being about 15 light years across. It's illuminated by a lot of the X-ray ultraviolet light from the very young stars that have formed this region, and this is because they are very young stars, so they're very active. Stars are very active in the end. They seem to have a quiet period, and then they towards the end of their age they become more active again as well. So we did talk about the pillars of creation, and this was the image that was made famous by Jeff Hester and Paul Scowen, who used the Hubble telescope. So you can see this was taken, I believe, in 1995. So this was one of the first shots they'd taken after I think it was Endeavour. I think it might have been the Space Shuttle Endeavour went up to repair it and put glasses on. Just like me, I've got bad eyesight, so I need glasses. Roger's got glasses as well, so we all need glasses.
I turned 50. I needed glasses. Hubble needed them after 0 years.
Yeah. So if you don't know the story, Hubble, this is why you test, and you do some more testing. Unfortunately, Hubble's primary mirror was shaven, polished about 2% of a human hair's width incorrectly. And so when Hubble got up into space and they took what's called first light, where they take the first image, they didn't get the image that they were expecting. They got better than what you could get here on Earth anyway, but it was still very, very fuzzy. And NASA was already in the doghouse for Challenger, but you did not want to work for NASA back in the early 90s with Hubble also faltering, and so they had to send another space shuttle launch up there to repair the Hubble. They needed to put in a new set of lenses that would sit above the primary mirror, so that they could work out the problem with the mirror. And also they had to repair one of the solar panels, which had incorrectly unveiled as well. They did take a later image, I think in 2012, and this is the update. Both images take into account visible light that we can see here, and also infrared light as well. So you've got a much more pronounced, you can see, you get a little bit more detail in the actual pillars themselves, and they are set, they're not straight across, they are set back from each other as well. So you have to remember, while it looks like a cool 3D object, it is or a 2D object, it is actually 3D as well. And there has been a supernova recently, or in the history of this nebula, hasn't there, Roger?
Actually, I'm not sure on that, Matt.
Yeah. So they had one. They think in about 1,000 years' time that we'll actually see this supernova explosion start to destroy the nebula. So you all have to remember that this has happened back about 7,000 years. So astronomers do believe that the pillars of creation don't exist anymore, and that's because the supernova has a star exploding at the end of its life has blown up, and that expanding shell of material has actually blown away the rest of the dust. So what will actually happen is you'll see the dust go from this image, but all the stars, see all the little light you can see here. This is all light that's lighting up dust and gas, and that's from baby stars that are all locked into the cloud of dust here. And so that's hydrogen and dust particles as well, which are forming new stars. And these little globules here, which you can just see on the edges here, they can last up to about 10 to 20,000 years. And in the star, you'll see that there is that there'll be little baby stars forming there as well. So when it does actually occur, it will be amazing to see over the next 1,000 years or so, as that to see exactly what happens to them as well.
Can I just make a bit of a comment on
that?
People might notice that in comparison to your shot, which you took through the Perth Observatory telescope there, which was a very red-pink colour. These Hubble shots are not that colouring. They're more the greeny blue kind of colouring with a bit of gold in there. And people might be wondering why. The shot which Matt took was taken with I presume, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, the Nikon D850A.
The D810A, yeah. 810A,
that's it. So basically astronomy optimized digital SLR. And so it's taken in visual light, as we'd call it, so normal red, green, blue, as we would see it, plus a bit more receptive to the hydrogen alpha. So that colour, as Matt showed in his original, maybe Matt, you might want to...
Yeah, we'll go back to it, yeah.
Is as sort of you would expect to see it as a human, a very sort of pink red colour. But the scientists, astronomers use different filters other than red, green and blue to pull out different details and learn more about nebulas and other objects in space. And so to do that, they, instead of using red, green and blue, they might use other filters to specifically pull out different elements. And in the case of this Hubble image, which Matt can now flick back to, the Hubble telescope used oxygen, O3, hydrogen alpha and sodium, S3. The HA, I haven't actually looked this up, it's HA and N2. I can't recall what the N2 is, but that palette of colour which you see there, that more greeny blue colour, I guess some people would call it false colour because it's not as humans would see it, but it's not false, it's just different representation of the elements which are in that nebula. So that's why there's a bit of a difference in the colouring between what Matt has taken with his off-the-shelf dish SLR and what the Hubble has taken there.
And also Hubble doesn't have to worry about an atmosphere as well. That does help. But it's nice to have an atmosphere because that means I can breathe. Now, Smelly Boy here has said, how do we know the supernova before we've actually seen it? Well, we know that it's happened because of images taken from the Spitzer Space Telescope in 2007. So the supernovas has happened away from the actual cluster itself, and then as you and then it's got some time for that shell of matter that's come off the explosion, or the explosion itself,
Shockwave.
To reach the shockwave. Yes, thank you. To get to the cluster as well. It'll be mirrors image. And we've also got T-Box here is asking, why does your image and Hubble image appear to mirror images of each other? Well, that's...
What way up is right, Matt?
Yeah. Well, that's a lot to do with especially the way the camera was actually situated on the telescope, but also the telescope does actually mirror. And I believe this is with the thing with reflective telescopes, isn't it? That it flips.
The more mirrors and lenses you have involved, you know, when you're looking through or photographing through a telescope, you have to move it around. You end up just not even thinking about which way. You just try a direction because they all, depending on the combination of mirrors and lenses, you'll end up flipping and reversing the image and so on.
Yeah. So I just haven't flipped the image from last night. So that's why you'll see, and that's that is one thing you'll notice if you say look at the moon through a telescope, like a reflecting telescope, where you have the principle works with, you have a primary mirror, a secondary mirror, the light comes through, hits the primary mirror, that mirror is concaved, so it focuses the light back up to the secondary mirror, and in the case of our telescope, the Meade 14, it actually goes through a hole in the primary mirror and into the eyepiece, and that's where the camera is looking in. So there has been some mirroring by the telescope itself. I hope that answers your question, T-Box.
And actually, just finishing up on that, one of the main differences between a telescope used for astronomy and a birding scope, as they call them, is that the scopes for terrestrial use for birding and so on have a correcting prism on them to put the images up the right way.
Another real cool feature of the Eagle Nebula is this was my wallpaper for a number of years. This is called the Spire, and this is another star forming region within the Eagle Nebula, and you can even see right here there's all these little stars that are being formed. There's a lot of stars in there as well. So we're going to go to another nebula, and this one is quite close. So we'll go from here, And we'll just go across to the more southerly, and we have the Omega Nebula. Now, it's also called the Swan. We like to call it the Swan Nebula here.
Yeah, look, I got into astronomy knowing it as the Swan Nebula, so I'm with you on that one.
Yep. So very close. Again, it's in between the constellations of Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer, Scotum, the Shield, and also Sagittarius. So we're looking directly into the center of our galaxy, and this was what we got to see there. So you can kind of see the swan. So we've got we have the wing, we've got the body here, and then the actual neck comes up and around here. So we have West Australia is famous for black swans, so this could be West Australia's nebula. State nebula. So yeah, it's also called the Omega Nebula because of the Greek letter. It's also referred to as the Checkmark Nebula, the Lobster Nebula, and also the Horseshoe Nebula, because it kind of looks a little...
Horseshoe as well.
Yeah. So
the thing that always gets me with the shape of this nebula is there's I don't know if people can make it out on your image there, but there's almost a cube, a square.
Yeah.
Which is it's sort of almost cookie cutter cut out of the the Swan Nebula there. And I tell you, every time I go to photograph this thing, I'm looking at my images thinking, is there something on my chip or my lens which is putting that sharp edge there? And then I look back at the other images and go, no, that's really how it is.
Yeah. I see. There is a great there's a great relationship between alcohol and astronomy, especially back in the days when you couldn't trust water because of all the diseases that. So, you know, you reckon some of these people that were looking at the objects might have had a high blood alcohol limit than they probably should have. But this is a reflection nebula with a small cluster as well. So these nebulas are a nursery for stars. So think of this as, you know, a star nursery and this one is actually a little bit closer to us than the Eagle Nebula. This is about anywhere between 5,000 to 6,000 light years away from us. The nebula, this part is actually about 15 light years across. But it's part of a much larger nebula, which is about 40 light years across in diameter. It is one of the brightest brightest nebulas, and also massive star-forming regions in our galaxy. It is a nice target to show, especially through our 30-inch telescope on a night sky tour. And we are moving into our winter objects now, so this will eventually become, once it just gets a little bit higher in the atmosphere on our night sky tours, become a target. There's about 800 stars, and these are really, 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 really young. They're about 1 to 2 million years old. So I think still very much toddlers or so as well. So
just with the viewing though, I have to admit that I was surprised how bright this appeared in our 30-inch telescope when I saw it. I was a bit pessimistic about us using it for public viewing, but yeah, Matt's right. We'll be using this, and I was surprised how well it came up. I guess because of the massive aperture of the 30-inch telescope. Yeah, it still surprised me.
Yeah, and it's always nice to have some of these nebulas in the wintertime, because because we're looking directly into the center of the galaxy, there's quite a lot of nice star clusters, open star clusters to show as well. So it is always good to have at least a couple of these nebulas in the night sky, so that we can show the entire life cycle also of stars as well. It's also got a lot of it's got a lot more formed stars than the Orion Nebula as well. There could also be more than about 1,000 stars actually forming in this nebula at this moment. So you can notice that it's while it's a little bit pinkish, that reddish pinkish color is actually coming from hot hydrogen gas being illuminated by the new stars as well. And You can actually see it through binoculars as well, but it's always good when you get a good astrophotographer, taking some amazing shots.
Probably fairly small in binoculars.
Yeah, you'll be able to just be able to see it.
Yeah, because as photography goes, certainly the Omega/1 Nebula is relatively small compared to things like the Orion Nebula, and even the Eagle Nebula just prior is a bit bigger in terms of field of view kind of thing. And so this nebula is a slight notch harder to photograph because you're typically working at a longer focal length.
Yeah. And it was first discovered in 1745, and it was recorded by Charles Messier in 1764 as well. So Mills says she likes the horseshoe term for it better. So best. So yeah, it's you can definitely see the horseshoe there. All right, so we'll go on to the next stage of a star, and we're gonna stay roughly around here, but in the center here. But we're gonna go into the Scorpion. Now, Scorpius is actually one of those constellations that you can actually see and clearly see and make out that it is a Scorpion. So you've got the pincers, the head. You've also got Antares, which is the red heart of the Scorpion. It's a star that's coming towards the end of its life. And then you'll see that there's the body, and it takes you can see the tail here, and then also into the stinger. And where we're looking is it's floating in the sky right here, and it's the butterfly cluster. So that's where we're looking.
If I'm not mistaken, we're looking quite high there. I mean, the Milky Way is starting to get quite high in the sky. So you're facing east, as you're sort of standing facing east, and you're looking up at probably, I'm guessing, about 60 degrees or so. I haven't
so we're going. So this is an hour ahead of us. So we can do. Actually, no, it's the right time now. So we're looking. We can actually work that out by. Let's have a look. I think this is it.
Maybe.
Yeah. So we're looking at the. It's just above, probably about 63 degrees into the east. We're looking. And you can actually kind of find it easier by looking for Ptolemy's cluster right here. Ptolemy's cluster is actually really good. It's a better binocular object than telescope object because it's so big. But if you have a look at for Ptolemy's cluster, and then just go up a little bit to the east and up a little bit, you'll be able to find the butterfly cluster as well. So we'll go, and this is the image that I took. This is the one that I prepared for you earlier. No, that's.
Oh, now, is this from the Me 14, which we use for public viewing again?
Yeah. So we're looking at an up close image here. So
yeah, quite a long focal length again. So it's going to be really showing a fairly small, well, probably a quarter of this the sort of.
We're looking at the center area here. Yeah. So you can see. You can see right here is the actual body of the butterfly, and then the wings. So again, you have to have the imagination, guys. And then you have the other wing here as well, and that makes up.
This kind of open cluster really comes to life in an eyepiece rather than a photo. Strangely enough, because you see that sort of twinkly star kind of effect.
Yeah, so this one is an open star cluster. This is what's happens next after a nebula has used up all the dust and gas it can. The radiation coming off the stars have been blown away the rest of the dust, and so you're left with stars that are loosely orbiting around each other. And it doesn't take a lot for these stars to get kicked out. And so over the next couple of 100 million years, they'll go off in their own direction. So think of this as primary school, high school, college, or uni or TAFE for stars, type of age for stars. And this one's even closer than the Omega or the Swan and the Eagle Nebula. This is about 1,600 light years away from us. So again, remember, we're seeing this object as it was 1600 years ago. It's 12 light years across, and it's also 25 light years across as well. Contains about 80 stars, which they're about a little older than the rest of the stars that we've seen tonight. They're about 55 to 100 million years old, and they're all formed from that same molecular cloud. So when you do have a look at this, what we call when we send the light for these stars through a prism, and we get the nice rainbow effect, we can see little Fraunhofer lines, and we've got the spectrum of the star, and we can see that they're all made up from one giant cloud, because they'll all have the same indicator, pretty much the same material as well. So Messier actually wrote that to the naked eye, M6 appears to be a nebula without stars, but with the slightest instrument reveals a cluster of small stars. It was also discovered by Giovanni Hodinara, and he actually found it in 1655, but his data wasn't found until the 1980s. So that's where cloud computing helps you. You'll never lose your data, will you, Roger?
Well,
all those photos of galaxies that you take, you've all got them secured in a nice location, don't you?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, with just on the size of this object. So, thinking back to the previous object, the Swan Nebula, that was roughly 20 arc minutes across. This one is roughly 70 arc minutes across. Now, you might not know what arc minutes translates to in naked eye, but to give you proportion kind of size, that gives you an idea, 20 versus 70. So this is quite a broad distributed object in the night sky, as opposed to something like the Swan Nebula, which was quite a lot more condensed.
And so it would have had a bigger nebula as well to form.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure how that would have worked over time in terms of whether the stars sort of spread out or such.
Yeah, and Dragon Master says Dragon Master says to say hello as well. So hello, Dragon Master. But there is a little bit of controversy here. The astronomer Robert Burnham Jr. proposed that the first century astronomer Ptolemy may have actually seen this with the naked eye while observing its neighbour's cluster called Ptolemy's cluster, which it's named after. But it was also independently discovered by Philip de Cesare in 1745 to 46 or so, roughly around that time. So when they say independently found, you've got to remember that back in the day they didn't have the internet, where when someone can go, I found a supernova, or I found a new cluster, and put it out to the world and everyone knows they found it. These astronomers would record catalogues and then send it into the astronomical societies, and then they would share their findings as well between them, and that's where you get these things where you can see that this was independently discovered by John Herschel, or this was independently discovered by Giovanni Hordirana as well. So that's where you get multiple people discovering it. Unfortunately, it's the first to write it down that ends up getting the discovery nowadays. So the last object before we move to some of Roger's cool photos is we're going to go into the southern hemisphere. So for a southern hemisphere only object tonight. So we have in the south almost 45 degrees, I believe. Let's have a look here. Yeah, almost 45 degrees up in the in the southern hemisphere is the Pavo cluster. Now, Pavo is Latin for peacock, and this is a really nice globular cluster. So we're going to go from a small young cluster to a really big old bunch of stars, and we'll go back. And this is the image I took last night. So, Roger, what is exactly a globular cluster?
Oh, look, great big ball of stars. They're usually distributed in the halo of the Milky Way, so the outer region. So you sort of have this sort of saucer shape of the Milky Way, and around that you have this halo. They're out in that outer region of the Milky Way. They're quite odd objects. There isn't certainty around how they're formed yet. There's a couple of leading theories, but I don't believe they've yet actually decided on one definite theory. There's so many stars in some of these globular clusters that there's some suggestion that maybe they were remnants of galaxy cores of galaxies which have been eaten up by other galaxies. So our galaxy, Milky Way, might have eaten up another galaxy and left a core behind. But there's other theories.
They think the Omega Centauri, if you the largest of the globular clusters, may have been that. I think one of the other thoughts is that they are there've been clouds of gas that have formed roughly around the same time as the galaxy as well.
From a photography perspective, they're very nice to photograph. A lot of them with a small telescope, so the small refractors that you might start off astrophotography with, so 600 sort of millimeter focal length, through to sort of 1.5 meter, 2 meter kind of focal length. By the time you get sort of to that kind of focal length, so a large telescope, you're starting to have to do some mosaics and so on to include a lot of them, because they are not tiny objects. I haven't actually looked up. I think this one's maybe 26 arc minutes.
Yeah, it's about 110, 100 light years across in diameter.
You talk in light years, Matt. I talk
arc minutes.
I talk in.
Oh, no, yeah.
How many arc minutes fit into my CCD?
But you do have to have some spacing around it in your images just to give it some perspective, don't you?
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. It can be an interesting challenge with digital astrophotography to take a nice image of these globular clusters and retain the good star color, because it is very easy for the stars to all just sort of bleach out to be white. So in Matt's image there, he's actually got some good retention of some yellow color there versus some more white color. But typically these clusters are primarily the yellow older stars. But I'll let Matt talk more about it.
Yeah, it was actually a really strange night last night because we had no wind. We didn't really have any wind, so thankfully the telescope was a little bit more stable than it usually is when when there's some wind. But also, it was really hard trying to get the actual focus perfectly as well, which was really strange. But we got at least some decent images here. But this globular cluster's about 13,000 light years away from us, and it is about 10 billion years old. So it is one of the younger globular clusters. There's about 180 of them in the around the Milky Way in the halo there. So not only do we have the biggest globular cluster, Omega Centauri, we also have the second biggest. And we've also got the third biggest one, which is Pavo's, or it's also known as the Starfish globular cluster, the Peacock cluster, and also the Windmill cluster as well.
And when you say we there, Matt, you're meaning Southern Hemisphere, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah. So Southern Hemisphere rules. Yeah, we don't have a pole star. But we've all got we've got the best objects in the night sky here.
I know how astrophotographers would love to have a pole star.
Yes, yes. If you ever do decide to get into astrophotography, there's basically the instructions for Northern Hemisphere people are find Polaris. That's it. There's about a couple, at least a page.
We're talking about aligning the equatorial map here to impact astrophotography and. Yeah, it's a little bit easier for an easy alignment in the Northern Hemisphere. Anyway, we digress.
Well, at least we're not talking about sci-fi, are we?
No, right, we're not.
Some of you might notice that there's a really bright star right here. Now, this is actually a foreground star. This one's actually called SAO, which stands for Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. and the catalogue. So it's that's the catalogue that we're going to be using, and so it's called SAO 254482. So again, lovely name. A bunch of numbers there, but one interesting thing that they've found with telescopic explorations of this globular cluster is that they've found a remarkable fraction of these stars near the cluster are actually multiple star systems. So most stars you'll find actually grow up with a sibling or multiple siblings. Our sun is very unusual that it doesn't have a sibling star, which again, when we did start looking out and having a look at other planets around other stars, we thought our solar system would be the norm, and we're starting to find out that actually our solar system's pretty unusual as well. It does actually have a lot of blue stragglers as well, which are stars that which are too young and also too massive to exist in the cluster, because all these stars are about twice the age of our sun, and so they believe these stars actually form from star mergers and collisions as well, because you've got a lot of stars orbiting around very close to each other, especially in the core. Our nearest star is the Alpha Centauri system, and that's about just over 4 light years away from us. So I think Steve, one of our volunteers, likes to talk about if you reduce the size of the sun down to the size of a pool ball or billiard ball, you would have the Alpha Centauri star system somewhere around Exmouth. That's how big space is, and so when you're in the center of these globular clusters, you're looking at about stars that are as close to each other, about 10% of a light year away. So we actually haven't found any planets around these in a globular cluster yet. But if there was, you wouldn't have nighttime, because at best you get dusk or sunset conditions, because there would just be so many stars around you as well. So again, this is also a circumpolar object for Perth, and it's also the first catalogued by James Dunlop, who was a Scottish. Yeah.
I just jump in there and explain what circumpolar is.
Yeah.
Matt. So Matt used the term there, circumpolar. What he means is that the object is always above the horizon, and it goes around. It moves around our south celestial pole, but it's always above the horizon.
Yeah, and so it means we'll always get a good view of it in here in Perth. And so James Dunlop actually, while he was Scottish, he actually came down to Australia to do his observing, and had a observatory in Parramatta in New South Wales. And he actually found this in 1827. Unfortunately, the observatory doesn't exist there anymore. They do have a little plaque to say where it was. But for a period of time, New South Wales actually had 2 observatories. They had Sydney Observatory, and then they had the one in Parramatta as well. So it's a nice little target to have. I do particularly like the globular clusters on a night time.
Just thinking about the area of the sky that it's in there, it's in Pavo, like you said. Well, you said Pavo, I said Pavo.
Pavo, yeah. Tomato.
Pavo is well known for a large cluster of fantastic galaxies. So as far as deep sky astrophotography through a telescope goes, there's a lot of good detail and a lot of good galaxies in that Pavo constellation.
Is it just down from it? I've got the Solarium there.
I don't recall exactly.
Yeah, but there are quite a lot of galaxies around that area. We'll have to do some nice shots of those as well. All right, so we'll get on to your photos, and
really?
Yes. So we'll show that. We'll show some of the cool nightscapes that Roger has taken. So this one was taken on Sunday, and this is looking at our octagonal dome. So you can actually see the Meade 14 here. This is the telescope that I took the images that we've just seen last night, and it's got also the ED80 refractor telescope that we've got attached to it as well. So it's 2 telescopes in one. And Jeff Scott, one of our awesome astrophotographers, he's taking a shot here, and we've got some people looking at the TV screens. So at I believe that was he showing the Trifid Nebula that night?
No, we were actually on Omega Centauri and Centaurus A. So Centaurus A is fantastic galaxy. I call it the hamburger galaxy, and it was coming up really well on the screen. So what we've got there is we've got Jeff Scott standing at the telescope there, operating the observatory's Nikon D810A, and he's streaming wirelessly to the screen which the people are looking at to the left of the dome. And so as part of this whole COVID-19 sort of changes we've had, we're having to find new ways to spread the people out at our public viewing nights. And one of the ways we're doing that is to have this electronically assisted astronomy, we're calling it, where you can not just look through the telescope like you can at the other spots, but here you can actually see an image taken through a telescope. And so yeah, on Sunday night he was showing the Centaurus A galaxy, and it was coming up absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But just 60-second exposures, so it's live. This is not sort of pre-baked stuff. It's live astrophotography. You see the images as they're acquired. And I was there to sort of learn. It's because I volunteer as a host of the Perth Observatory. I was learning the new rules around COVID and what we're doing. It turns out I have a completely buggered up sciatic nerve, and so
Yes, you are a trooper tonight. You know.
I'm sitting down.
Yeah.
But, I ended up not being able to do too much that night, and I left pretty early. But I did have the opportunity to whip out my little Fuji XE2 and do a bunch of photos, and this one is one of those. So it's just a single exposure. I was doing just 15 or 13 second exposures. I can't actually remember what this one was. And that is pretty much straight out of the camera. The only thing which I've done to that image is I took several exposures, and one of them had Jeff standing in the right place, and the other one had the right lighting on the night sky in the foreground. So I've superimposed just brought Jeff through in from one of the shots. But other than that, the night sky, as you see it there, and the light on the dome and the light on the people is as it was from that photo out of the Fuji XE2. Fantastic sort of result out of the camera. And it shows you also that while we are showing you in this new sort of post-COVID night sky tour a photograph on the screen, we managed to control the brightness as best we can, and you can see the people aren't getting absolutely dazzled by light there. It's a really good experience. It's worked out quite well.
And it's also good because you get we can show people stuff on the night sky tour that we couldn't really show through the telescope, or they wouldn't get as good a view as well. So, and it's interesting seeing the different light in there as well, because you've got the red light, which is being caused by the lights within the actual dome itself, and then you've got the orange light coming from, I think you said yesterday that on our training meeting, a volunteer training meeting, that you think it might have been from our Perth Lowell telescope dome that was lit up.
This was one of the very lucky nights of this weekend, where we started out the evening thinking it was going to be clouded out, but it literally, as the evening started, it just cleared up to be a beautiful night. And this is why we encourage people to come along regardless of whether they think it's cloudy or not, because you just never know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
And I tell you, there's a few people which didn't come on that night, so they missed out on a fantastic night. But because of that sort of expectation of it maybe being cloudy, we had the lights on the steps of our great big tall Lowell observatory dome there, and that is casting the light onto the octagonal dome there. Light pollution is not always a bad thing for astrophotography, I have to admit. If there's too much that you can't see the night sky, that's a problem. But if there's enough to just gently light the foreground, it can actually work quite well. Or to form a focal point in the distance.
And so, because it's very cold, people are wearing jeans, so you get some. There's white light coming from the actual TV itself. It's got some. you can see the blueness of people's genes as well. So you're getting good reach of colour, and you've got a decent image of the centre of the galaxy there as well. And you've also got the lime green of our Indigenous Astronomy Centre, Warman Kinney, as well. So yeah, it's a really nice shot. All right, and we'll move on to a really nice shot of the centre of the galaxy. Now, you can actually see the difference between light conditions as well by how many stars there are in this in this image as well. So Roger, take it away. What can you actually see in this lovely, lovely image?
So basically, running almost straight up, down, vertically through the shot is the central bar of our Milky Way, the central bulge of our Milky Way. The dust lane through the centre of that, which is blocking out light from the stars behind, and then we're seeing a few more stars on either side of that central dust lane. The objects that we looked at earlier this evening, the Eagle Nebula and the Swan Nebula, they're in that central region as well. To the left of that, just slightly up from the centre, is a small cluster of, not small, but a cluster of stars with a bit of yellow and a bit of blue around them.
Antares right there.
And Antares is the yellow star. Maybe, Matt, if you can put your mouse on Antares.
Just there, right there.
That's it, yeah. So that Roa-Fuki region there with the dust lanes coming out from that is a fantastic astrophotography subject. On the right of the field of view, we've got a very bright, what looks like a star. That's actually Jupiter. Jupiter's been shining quite nicely near the Milky Way for a while. And so this image I took at my dark sky observatory out in the central wheat belt a couple of, 2 or 3 weeks ago when...
it's so long ago now.
must be at least 3 full moons been and gone. When Perth observers, a bunch of Perth Observatory hosts and volunteers came out for a bit of a camping weekend, and so this is actually...
We also planted trees, Roger. We worked for our dark sky.
That's right. We've got to get you working. No lazing around. So this is actually 15 exposures. Each of them was 30 seconds, and I've stacked those together. This was taken with my Canon 6D and a Samyang 24mm lens. So this one sort of shows you the nice clarity of dark skies. You've got that rich star field around it and nice colour. I didn't have to do much processing to this, and I've chosen to not sort of overdo it, I suppose. So it's had some saturation brought back into it, a little bit of levels in terms of contrast and setting the white balance, but not really much more than that. So I think that sort of covers that image for you there, Matt.
So Dragon Master's asking what's a dust lane. Now our galaxy is a large spiral galaxy. It's a barred spiral. So the dust lanes that you'll see, which is you can see in this image down here, this is one of the arms of the galaxy, and this is called the Sagittarius arm. And it's actually a minor arm. There's 2 main arms. There's the Perseus arm, and off the top of my head, which was the other one? But in the summertime, we actually get to see the Perseus arm as well, and the Orion spur. And so these are molecular. Well, there's dust, and there's also molecular hydrogen. So eventually, this dust and gas will actually become stars, and so when you get to see a nice classical image of a spiral galaxy, you'll see these little arms, and that's what we're talking about here as well. So right in amongst here, if you head about 25,000 light years, you'll head to the center of our galaxy and reach our supermassive black hole called Sagittarius A star. Now, Roger, Dragon Master also asked a little bit earlier on, what is a good telescope to start with astrophotography?
There's a myriad of options, and it always depends on your budget. An easy starting for a telescope, the starting entry price point is about $2,000. I normally say. and that's assuming you've got a camera. So for $2,000, you can pick up something like a Skywatcher EQ mount, you can get a HEQ5 Pro. You can put a little refractor on it, like a 80mm ED, would call it. That's got a focal length of about 600mm and an aperture of 80mm. Put those two together and hook that up to your computer, put your camera on that, a couple of adapters, and you're sort of off and going. You can get in that kind of price point. You can get a little electronic fine scope, a guide scope, which helps you keep the tracking steady, and that's sort of the I guess the go-to easy option for getting started. But there, as I say, there's a myriad of other options. These days there's a lot of fast modified Newtonian designs of optics, which get you down to sort of f2 or f4 kind of focal ratios, and those are very appealing, a bit more expensive.
With the equatorial mount, you get that nice. You don't have that whole thing of with the fork mounts where you go up, side, up, side, up, side. It's a nice, more circular.
Well, I guess let's draw the distinction between alt-az mount versus equatorial, because fork mounts in themselves I quite like for astrophotography, because you can continue through the meridian without having to flip. But you do have to have an equatorially mounted optical tube and camera, so an EQ mount or an equatorially mounted fork.
Yeah. So if you do want to have a look for telescopes, there's two really good places here in Perth. There's Bino Central, who Keith there is really nice guy and has a store up in Joondalup, and there's also Camera House Midland as well, which Russell owns that store and does some really cool workshops as well. And Roger, you also do some workshops, don't you?
Yeah,
and we do some as well together.
You keep hassling me, and actually I got an email from someone today, and a few days ago another person saying, "Are we starting workshops again?" We need to book some in at the Perth Observatory, but I do one-on-one workshops, and I do group workshops primarily at the Perth Observatory and with Stargazers Club out in the field, teaching astrophotography. So I do a lot of that. I also run them at my dark sky site on demand, so that's one-on-ones where someone is keen to do deep sky astrophotography or a wide field which is under dark sky conditions, and they're happy to travel for that 2 hours into the central wheat belt.
And so you can go to, is it astrophotography.com.au?
That's right. Yeah, astrophotography.com.au is my astrophotography business, where I do the workshops and that kind of thing. Yep.
And you can also check out the Perth Observatory website for the workshops that Roger does with us. And also,
we'll be putting them up soon, won't we?
Yes, we'll have to get that old schedule out and put some dates in. And also, you can find them on our Facebook page as well. We'll put up event pages for them as well, so that you can then proceed to the website as well to book as well. So thanks very much for joining me tonight, Roger.
Just finally, Matt, I remembered, of course, with COVID and all that, I've been doing the online workshops as well.
Yeah.
So we did a Perth Observatory group workshop through Teams, which the Perth Observatory uses, and that went fantastically. And I've done some one-on-one workshops through FaceTime and WhatsApp. I do those from my backyard observatory here, so I have studio lighting set up. I've got all the tracker gear, all the camera gear, everything there, and the participant has got all their stuff at home at their end as well. So it's kind of, in some ways, it's better than doing it in person, because you don't have to think about what gear you might or might not take. You've just got everything there with you. So I've been doing that as well. But thanks for having me, Matt.
No problem. And guys, thanks very much for joining us tonight. I hope you had a really good night. It sounds like it's raining again, which is annoying because I've got to now run to the car. but look, definitely, guys, if you want to follow us on social media, there's all the links in the description to our social media. If you feel like helping donate to the observatory and get some cool stuff in the meantime, there's our Patreon link there as well. And we hope to see you again. We'll be doing this in 2 weeks' time, and so on Wednesday again. Hopefully we'll have a nice clear night. I do deserve that after all, the hard work I've done. And guys, also if you can like this page and share it to your family and friends, and subscribe as well, that would be fantastic as well. And Mel says thanks, Roger, as well. So, and Dragmaster says thanks. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you later, and hope you have a great rest of the week and have a great weekend as well. See ya.
See ya.